Okay, let's just take stock here. I'm really struggling to integrate these drivers because the woofer has quite a peak between 800 hertz and, sorry, more like 600 hertz to 1 kilohertz, and it's quite a nasty peak. And I've been working on a notch filter here to pull that down. And the tweeter has such a rising response. I've been again using a cap across the tweeter to sort of try and pull that down, or a series inductor. Nothing wants to integrate correctly. These drivers just don't want to work together. So yeah, 2 hours in, I'm not getting particularly far. Yeah, it's not straightforward. Right, okay, I am really, really happy with where I've got to, and it's taken, what's the time, 3 o'clock? About 4 hours. 4 hours of firing measurements, changing component values, building a woofer notch filter, notching out the top of the tweeter's response, because it had a really high rising response. Yeah, but I'm there, and I'm very, very pleased with the measurements, which I'll put up shortly. I've had to lose a bit of sensitivity because of the notch filters. I'm only about 86 dB sensitive at 1 kilohertz, but hey, it's worked out really, really well. Oh, blimey. Right, so I've spent the last 4 hours with all my measurement space up, and yeah, designing a new crossover for these, and it's taken quite a lot of doing. What I've ended up with is quite different to this. So yeah, these drivers have been really difficult to work with. The SB Acoustics tweeter is good, but arranged in this baffle, it has a huge rising response. So I've only needed a second order filter on the tweeter, but I've needed an inductor at the front of the network to pull down that response with a resistor across it as well. So that's taken a bit of doing. This woofer is all over the place. It is, in fact, I'll put the raw driver responses in now, and you can see what I mean. The tweeter looks quite well behaved as just on its own in there, but the moment you put any form of network on it, it just peaks up. So this woofer has two nasty little peaks which were really difficult to deal with. So again, with a woofer, I really only needed a second order filter, but I needed a notch filter, and quite a tricky one as well to pull down those two peaks. Almost needed two notch filters, but the peaks are so close together that would have just been silly. So what I'm going to do now is put up the on axis that I've ended up with together with the original on axis. And I think you can see it's quite different, much more balanced. Yeah, I've had a quick listen to them just with everything clipped together. Really good, nice. The bass is there now because everything is relative on the frequency response. Vocals, whilst I'm only listening to it mono, are just right level wise. So I think once the crossovers are built properly and they're listened to, I think they're going to be pretty good. In fact, very good. I do need to do a bit of work inside the cabinet, so some foam, because if I put up the spectral decay now, there's still a little bit of ringing, which I'm sure is box resonance. But the spectral decay compared to what it was before is much, much better, much, much better. Vertically, these perform really, really well. In fact, listening slightly above the tweeter is probably going to be even better. So here are the new vertical measurements. And horizontally as well, they perform really well. I was finding as I was taking horizontal measurements, the 3 to 6 kilohertz region was beginning to lift up. So I reduced the value of the capacitor on the tweeter circuit to pull that back down, slightly at the expense of the on axis, but you know, sometimes there is a compromise, unless you're going to listen to these speakers head in a vice towed right in against you and have no real listening performance if you move left or right, and also how they interact with the room. Sometimes you have to make these sort of compromises as well. So horizontal measurements. Yeah, so I'm really pleased. So I'm going to draw the new crossover up now, and yeah, it's very different to a simple second order high and low pass that we had originally. Right, hopefully this is going to work, because every time I use the different lens on the camera, it focus bounces. So if it's doing that, I'm sorry, I can't tell from here. Right, okay, so let's draw out what we've ended up with. So if we look at the woofer circuit first, it's a fairly straightforward second order filter to start with. So we come in through a 1.5 millihenry inductor, and we ground that with a 12 microfarad capacitor. So simple second order filter. And then we have a notch filter, which comprises of a 20 microfarad capacitor, a 15 ohm resistor, and a pretty large 2.7 millihenry inductor. So that circuit's tuned to pull down that peak in the middle of the response. And then on the tweeter circuit, we come through a very small 0.1 millihenry inductor with a 10 ohm resistor across it into a 6 microfarad capacitor into the positive of our tweeter, and we ground that with a 0.33 millihenry inductor. So what I'm going to put up now is a measurement with and without this notch filter and this section here to roll the top of the tweeter off, and you can see the effect that and that has. So yeah, those drivers needed a bit of correction to get a reasonably decent response. Anyway, there we go.